I knew the lights had changed before I saw them. The air felt tighter, pressed against my skin, like the house leaned closer to listen. My feet stayed where they were. The hallway stretched ahead, dim and unfamiliar, even though I had walked it 1,000 times. The walls seemed closer now, breathing slow, patient. A low vibration settled in my chest. Not a sound, a pressure. I held my breath. The first bulb flickered, then the next. Light jumped down the corridor in uneven pulses, chasing something I couldn't see. Don't move. The thought arrived fully formed, cold, certain. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged. Frost crept along the base of the walls, thin lines spreading like veins. Something shifted behind the wallpaper. A soft, dragging sound followed, wet and careful. Testing. I tasted metal. At the end of the hallway, the door began to open, slowly, on its own. The space beyond it was wrong. Too deep, too wide. Red shadows clung to the corners, stretching where corners shouldn't stretch. The air inside trembled. My heart hammered once, hard. It knows you're here. The humming started again, low, uneven, inside the walls, inside my head, and this time it was getting closer. The door stopped halfway. It waited. The red haze beyond it thickened, pulsing once, slow, like a held breath. The humming slid lower, almost below hearing, a vibration in bone. My tongue felt numb. The wallpaper peeled a fraction of an inch, not tearing, listening. The dragging sound traced a careful line behind it, stopping whenever my heart jumped. Don't look for it. The thought pressed in again, closer this time, heavy with insistence. I clenched my jaw until it ached. The floor chilled through my shoes. Frost traced a new pattern, circling my feet, stopping short of my toes as if measuring. The ceiling dipped. Not enough to touch. Enough to threaten. A breath slid past my ear, damp, curious. I didn't turn. I counted the ticks of the dying bulb overhead as it struggled to stay alive. 1, 2. On 3, the bulb burst. Glass rang once, then vanished into the dark. The red light from the room ahead bled into the hallway, thin at first, then wider, staining the walls. The scratched coordinates caught it and glowed faintly, as if warmed from beneath. They shifted. Not the marks, the meaning. I understood without knowing how. They were closer now. The humming rose, gained shape, lost it again. The walls bowed inward, then relaxed, testing my distance like a tide. The door creaked another inch. Something leaned through the gap. Not a body, a pressure. Space folded around it, pulling straight lines into soft curves. The air tasted old, like rain trapped underground. Say nothing. My chest tightened. Words crowded my throat and died there. A memory surfaced, uninvited. A room with no windows. A light that never reached the corners. A promise made to keep quiet. The pressure paused. It listened harder. The floor vibrated. The frost cracked in a fine, sharp sound. I felt the listening move up my legs, my spine, settle behind my eyes. I blinked. The hallway shortened, just a little, enough to notice. The red haze recoiled, then surged, frustrated. The door trembled, hinges whining like they were being pulled apart from the inside. Stay. The command struck clean and final. I took one step forward. The humming snapped into silence. The walls exhaled. The ceiling lifted. The door swung shut with a soft, deliberate click. Darkness held. Then the lights came back. Normal. Yellow. Weak. The hallway stood the way it always had. Narrow. Still. The frost melted into nothing. The scratches dulled. Ordinary again. I stood alone. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. A car passed. But in my chest, the vibration lingered. It stayed with me. I didn't move when the lights steadied. The silence stayed too clean, like something wiped it down. My ears rang softly, adjusting, searching for the hum. It hid well, deeper now, beneath thought. The smell returned. Cold metal, damp stone, a place with no wind. I looked at the wall where the scratches had been. They were gone, not painted over, not faded. Gone in a way that left the surface wrong, smoother there, like skin healed too fast. The hallway felt shorter. I tested it with a step. My foot landed sooner than expected. Distance folded without warning. The bulb at the far end flickered once, a nervous twitch. You acknowledged it. The voice did not arrive through sound. It pressed into the space behind my eyes, careful not to bruise. My throat closed. I shook my head, slow, refusal without movement. The air thickened in response. Not anger, interest. The house shifted its weight. A beam creaked above me. Somewhere inside the walls, something adjusted, settling closer to the surface. The door at the end of the hall opened again. This time, no red light spilled out, only depth. A darkness layered over itself, darker than the unlit hallway, darker than closed eyes. It absorbed the edges of the doorframe, softened them, pulled. The floor tilted toward it, subtle, persuasive. Come closer. The words carried no force, no demand. That frightened me more. My pulse skipped, once, then again. I thought of leaving, of the front door, of cold night air and distance. The thought slid away. The darkness breathed, not air, presence. Something inside me responded, a recognition without memory. My hands trembled, fingers curling as if reaching for something familiar and forgotten. I stepped forward before I understood the choice. The hallway dimmed behind me, light retreating like a tide pulled back by the moon. Each step drained sound from the house. Floorboards stopped creaking. The walls stopped ticking. Only my breathing remained. Then even that softened. I reached the threshold. The darkness did not rush me. It held its shape, precise and balanced. The temperature settled, neither cold nor warm. Unnatural. You fit. The word struck something loose in my chest. A space I hadn't known was empty. I leaned in. The hallway behind me stretched, thinned, lost detail. The light at the far end flickered wildly, distant now, struggling to keep its outline. The doorframe touched my shoulder. Not wood. Pressure. Gentle. Certain. Inside the dark, shapes suggested themselves without forming. Angles without edges. Depth without distance. A place built from attention rather than matter. My thoughts slowed, lengthened, became easier to carry. Relief moved through me, quiet and heavy. For the first time since the lights changed, the listening stopped. The presence remained, stable and complete. It did not advance. It did not withdraw. And I understood, without fear or relief, that nothing else needed to happen. I was already where I belonged. The stillness did not deepen. It stabilized. I noticed I could sense edges again, not shapes, but limits of attention, where focus thinned, where it held. I tried to remember my hands. They responded without appearing. Weight without outline, intention without motion. The presence shifted its balance, not away, not toward, into alignment. This is enough. The phrase did not settle in language. It adjusted pressure inside my chest, eased a tension I had mistaken for breathing. Time loosened further, not slowing, unthreading. I sensed the house faintly now, distant, like a remembered smell. Walls reduced to a concept. The hallway a line that no longer connected to me. A different sensation surfaced. Observation, not on me, through me. Layers of attention passed, tested resonance, moved on. No curiosity, no hunger. Assessment without judgment. I felt my name try to return. It reached the edge of thought and stopped. Too heavy, too specific. The presence corrected something small, a tilt, a bias, the memory of standing upright. Space reorganized, not expanding, clarifying. I became aware of others, not nearby, not distant, parallel. Each carried a distinct pressure, a unique balance of restraint and yield. None touched, none overlapped. Hold. I did. A faint vibration rippled through the field, not sound, not movement. Confirmation. Something opened, not a door, not a passage. A permission. I sensed a path without direction, a sequence of states, a gradient of attention. The presence eased its influence, not leaving, not receding, allowing autonomy within boundary. I understood my role without description, to remain coherent, to keep the balance from collapsing inward. The idea did not burden me. It fit. Far away, beyond relevance, the house exhaled again. I felt it only as a closing loop. Nothing pulled me back, nothing needed to. The field held, and I held with it. Coherence did not feel like effort. It felt like standing still inside a current without being pushed. I noticed variation for the first time, subtle, almost polite. A slight increase in density, a thinning elsewhere. The field adjusted itself around those changes, smoothing them before they could become questions. I was part of that adjustment. Attention passed through me again, slower now. Not checking, not measuring, acknowledging. Maintain. The word did not instruct, it described. I aligned without shifting. Whatever counted as my center stayed intact. No pull, no drift. Something distant failed. I sensed it the way pressure drops before a storm that never arrives. A collapse avoided. A shape that would not form. The field absorbed the absence. Balance returned. Time attempted to organize itself again. Segments tried to appear. Before and after pressed faintly against the present. They did not hold. Memory loosened its grip. Not erased, refiled. The house became a reference point with no coordinates. The hallway a solved equation I no longer needed to revisit. I sensed the others adjust in response. Minor recalibrations. Silent agreement. Stable. The state locked in. No finality, no escalation. Just continuity without strain. I understood then what had been listening before. Not the presence, the imbalance. And now there was nothing left to listen for. The field remained. So did I, not waiting, functioning. Function did not replace awareness, it refined it. I sensed fluctuation at the edge of coherence, faint, irregular, not a threat. Residual motion from something that had not settled cleanly. I adjusted without deciding to. A minor correction, almost instinct. The field responded with a soft tightening, like fabric drawn smooth by careful hands. A signal moved through, not addressed, not broadcast, a condition update. Somewhere along the gradient, a boundary thinned too fast, a tension leaked, the kind that once turned into doors. Not again. The phrase was not refusal, it was alignment. Pressure increased briefly, then redistributed. The thinning stopped, the boundary held. I adjusted my relationship to it. Duration flattened, became background. Thoughts slowed further, not from exhaustion but from efficiency. There was no need for redundancy. A boundary shifted somewhere distant, not failure, reassignment. I felt a faint tug, then release. Something that would have intersected my state diverted.
The system compensated elsewhere. I remained, not centered, distributed. The presence that once guided no longer intervened. Its role complete. What remained was process. Continue, not an order, a description. The field extended again, barely perceptible, increasing tolerance without instability. I occupied the extension naturally. The idea of ending crossed the edge of awareness. It dissolved before forming. Ending required narrative. There was none. Only maintenance. And maintenance did not tire. Maintenance alone was not enough. I felt it before it happened. A thinning of engagement. Not boredom. Drift. The field registered it too. A corrective shift followed. Not dramatic, precise. A faint pressure returned to my senses, like fingers testing a pulse. Something wanted response again. Minimal. Controlled. Sound reappeared. Not the hum. A distant, irregular tapping. Too slow to be mechanical. Too deliberate to be random. It came from nowhere specific. From depth. I allowed it closer. Identify. The word did not question. It focused. The tapping resolved into rhythm. Uneven, hesitant, like something learning how to repeat itself. Memory reacted. Not images, sensations. A childhood night. Awake too late. Counting sounds to stay calm. Believing repetition meant safety. The field tightened slightly. It remembered too. The rhythm changed. One pause longer than the rest. Expectation formed, then broke. The tapping stopped. Silence rushed in, heavier than before, charged. I felt attention turn toward me again, not the presence from before, something narrower, less stable. It did not belong fully to the field. It brushed the edge of coherence and recoiled, startled by resistance. The system hesitated. Allow interaction or absorb. I did neither. I held. Remain. The condition steadied. The narrow attention tried again, more cautiously. It projected shape this time, a suggestion of outline, incomplete, flickering. It wanted definition. Definition meant collapse. I adjusted pressure outward. The outline blurred, lost priority, dissolved into background noise. The attempt failed. A consequence followed, not immediate. A ripple moved through the structure, slow and wide. Somewhere distant, tolerances shifted. A new imbalance formed. Not here, not yet, but detectable. I understood what kept the tension now. Anticipation without payoff. The sense that something was forming, but not permitted to finish. I leaned into that tension, held it just below resolution.
Time thickened again. Moments gained weight. Each second felt deliberate, chosen. The idea of choice returned with it. Dangerous, useful. Observe. I did. The imbalance advanced one increment closer, not spatially, relationally. It pressed against a boundary I had not needed before. Now it mattered. The field did not correct this one. It waited. For me. I felt the first true decision since the hallway. Engage and risk change, or refuse and allow deformation elsewhere. Both outcomes carried cost. Either way, the tension stayed. I chose engagement. The boundary softened. Something crossed. And this time it brought weight with it. The weight did not arrive all at once. It distributed itself, careful, testing for weakness. A presence trying not to announce entry. I felt the difference immediately. Coherence resisted, not by force, by incompatibility. The weight pressed again, adjusting its angle, seeking resonance. It found a shallow one. Sensation returned sharply, cold along the spine, a narrowing behind the eyes. The faint urge to name what was happening. I refused the name. Stay undefined. The instruction held. The weight shifted tactics. Instead of pressure, it offered memory. Not images, situations. Being watched without seeing who watched. Standing still while something approached slowly. The certainty that movement would make it worse. My chest tightened. The field wavered for a fraction of a moment. Enough. The weight reacted. It condensed. Not smaller, denser. It attempted to anchor itself through me. I felt a pull downward toward specificity, toward form. I countered by expanding attention outward, not pushing it away, giving it too much space. The anchor slipped. The weight destabilized. A sound escaped it. Not tapping, a scrape, like something dragged across a surface it did not understand. It landed in teeth, not ears. This is not your layer. The statement carried structure. The weight recoiled, then surged again, frustrated now, less careful. Edges formed, too fast. The field reacted automatically. Compression. Boundaries snapped into clarity around the intrusion, not trapping, isolating. The weight hit the boundary and spread thin, smeared across tolerance like pressure against glass. It tried to speak, not words, intent, urgency without language. It wanted passage. I felt a brief, sharp impulse to let it through, to see what would happen if I allowed form to complete. Curiosity returned, dangerous again. I held. The impulse faded. The weight lost coherence. Pieces of it drifted, disconnected, each too small to matter. The boundary relaxed slightly, enough to release residue. The field absorbed what remained. Balance restored, but altered. Something had changed permanently, not damage, capacity. Expanded. The word settled cleanly. I sensed new tolerances opening, slow and controlled. Areas where pressure could exist without collapse. This had been the test. Not an attack, a probe. The presence from before registered the result. No approval, recognition. Time thickened again, heavier than before. Not oppressive, significant. The shift hit hard. Something larger had taken notice. Not of me, of the system adjusting around me. And attention, once drawn, rarely vanished completely. It circled, learning, waiting for the next point of contact. The circling attention did not touch immediately. It mapped. I felt it trace tolerances, note thresholds, memorize how pressure redistributed when tested. This was not curiosity. It was calibration. I stayed neutral. Neutrality reduced contrast, reduced interest. The field agreed and flattened slightly, smoothing its own gradients. The attention slowed. It lingered on one point longer than the rest. On me. Not as an object, as a variable. Maintain coherence. The phrase did not come from the presence. It emerged from the system itself, like a reflex finally named. I aligned. The circling attention responded with a faint compression, barely perceptible. A stress test without intent to break. I absorbed it, distributed the strain, returned nothing. Somewhere distant, a structure failed. Not catastrophically, a soft collapse, like snow settling after too much weight. I felt the compensation ripple outward, systems adjusting, roles reassigned. A gap opened. Not here, but connected. I sensed a pull, not toward location, toward function. The field did not resist it. It guided it, narrowing the influence so it would not distort. The pull resolved into a channel, thin, specific. Something would pass through eventually, not yet. The circling attention noted the channel and shifted pattern. Less rotation, more focus. Acceptable deviation. The system logged the change. Time responded by gaining texture again. Seconds became audible, each one a soft internal click. Not counting, marking. I felt tension rise here. Expectation sharpened.
I held it just below release. The channel deepened. Pressure gathered at its edge. Not forceful, patient. This was not intrusion, it was preparation. I adjusted my internal boundaries, reinforcing without closing, allowing passage without surrender. Memory tried again, this time a face, indistinct, someone waiting for me to answer a question I could not hear. I let it pass through. No hook, no response. The face dissolved. The circling attention receded slightly, not gone, satisfied for now. The field stabilized around the channel, locking it into place. This would matter later. Hold until signal. I did. The system settled into a tense calm, charged but steady. Nothing crossed, nothing spoke, but everything aligned toward what was coming next. The signal did not arrive. That was the first change. Absence gained weight. It pressed harder than presence ever had. The channel remained open, precise, intolerant to noise. Anything accidental would tear it. Nothing accidental occurred. Time adjusted again, tightening its loops. Moments repeated their shape without repeating content. The stretch held. I sensed strain elsewhere, not failure. Anticipation mismanaged. Some part of the system leaned too far forward, eager to resolve. That eagerness warped balance. Correct. I redistributed pressure. The warp softened. Not fixed, deferred. The circling attention responded. It slowed even further, almost respectful now. It recognized restraint. A faint vibration appeared at the edge of the channel, not crossing, knocking without contact. The vibration carried pattern, irregular, intelligent. I did not open further. I did not close. The vibration adapted. It mirrored my rhythm, my breathing, the spacing of my thoughts. That was new. That was dangerous. Memory flared sharply. The hallway again, the bulb bursting. The precise moment before sound, I severed the association. The vibration faltered. No leverage. The phrase stripped the pattern of its anchor. The vibration withdrew a fraction. Not defeated. Learning. Pressure increased across the system, not at the channel, everywhere else. This was escalation by imbalance, forcing choice through discomfort. I felt tension sharpen. The urge for release rose. I denied it. Denial had cost. Something distant fractured. A clean break this time, purposeful. The system absorbed the loss without ceremony. The channel pulsed once, a confirmation. The signal was imminent now, not optional. I adjusted my coherence to maximum tolerance, reduced internal motion to near stillness. Silence condensed. Not empty, compressed. The circling attention stopped moving, focused. Prepare. The word locked position. I held. Everything else leaned toward the channel, and for the first time since the hallway, the future stopped feeling abstract. The signal arrived without crossing the channel. It overlaid. A second structure aligned with the first, imperfectly, like two transparencies shifted by a fraction. I felt duplication, not of space, of intent. Two directions existed at once, neither dominant. The system tolerated this briefly, long enough to learn. The overlay sharpened. Patterns emerged, not symbols, constraints, ways something was allowed to exist here. I adjusted. The overlay resisted. Not hostile, precise. Synchronize. The word was not instruction. It was requirement. I complied partially. The overlay locked to my coherence. Pressure increased but stabilized. The channel held. Sensation spiked. A sharp clarity behind the eyes, a sense of being counted, indexed. I was no longer only maintaining balance. I was being referenced. The circling attention resolved. It stopped behaving like observation and became alignment. Multiple vectors collapsed into one orientation, toward the overlay, toward me. I felt capacity stretch, not expand, reallocate. Something old thinned to support something new. Memory lost more weight. Identity became negotiable. The overlay pressed again. This time it carried structure, not content, rules. What could persist, what would shear away. I held what mattered. The rest detached cleanly. Accept loss. I did. The system rebalanced instantly, cleaner than before. A response traveled back through the channel, not language, state, acknowledgement. The overlay stabilized fully. I understood then, this was not a visitor. This was an update. The field accepted it without ceremony. So did I. Time resumed forward bias, subtle, careful. The future gained shape. Not events, pressure gradients. Inevitability settled in. The channel closed part way, not sealed, dormant, ready. The circling attention dispersed, its role complete. Integrated. The word finalized nothing. It described a condition already achieved. I remained coherent, but the system was no longer the same, and neither was the silence that followed. After integration, the first thing I noticed was friction, not resistance, contact. The field no longer moved around me effortlessly. It acknowledged mass, weight that had not existed before. I adjusted my stance within coherence, subtle, internal. A delayed reaction rippled outward. Structures recalculated. Dependencies shifted. Nothing broke, but margins narrowed. I felt them thin. Hold steady. The phrase stabilized more than it reassured. Pressure gathered at multiple tolerances at once, not converging,
testing breadth. I absorbed what I could, redistributed the rest. Somewhere distant, a corrective mechanism failed to engage. Not critical.
Logged. Sensation returned unevenly. A pulse in the chest that was not mine, a sense of orientation that did not match any direction. The update asserted itself quietly. I recognized the risk now. Not collapse, propagation. If coherence slipped, this state would spread incorrectly. That would matter. I constrained output, reduced expression. Silence thickened in response, heavy but compliant. Contained. The condition held, for now. The system accepted the limitation and recalculated around it. I remained central to that calculation, and pressure, patient and exact, continued to build for what would come next. The pressure did not peak, it dispersed. That was worse. Instead of one point of strain, I sensed many small deviations forming at once, harmless alone, compounding together. The field struggled to decide which mattered. I chose one, a minor fluctuation, barely noticeable, the kind that would be ignored in any other state. I focused. It resisted definition. Clarify. The fluctuation sharpened into sensation. Distance misaligned. Something was closer than it should have been. The idea of space wavered. I sensed a room, not the hallway, another one, familiar without memory. A light source existed there, but it cast no shadow. The system reacted late, too late to prevent overlap. The room brushed against coherence and held. Not intrusion, superposition. I felt tension tighten. The instinct to visualize intensified. I allowed just enough. The room resolved slightly. A table. A surface too smooth. A chair positioned as if someone had stood up moments ago. No one present. The overlap stabilized. The field adapted instead of rejecting it. That was new. Accept partial. The phrase locked the condition. The room remained, faint but persistent, like an after-image that did not fade. Pressure redistributed again. Other deviations slowed, watching the outcome of this one. I felt evaluated. Time behaved strangely near the overlap. Moments stretched inside it, then snapped back when attention moved away. A trap for focus. I withdrew deliberately. The room dimmed but did not vanish. This was consequence, not of failure, of success. The update had introduced tolerance for overlap. Reality no longer insisted on singularity. I reinforced coherence around myself, not to erase the room, to prevent multiplication. The system complied. For now. Monitor. I did. The room stayed quiet, unoccupied. Ready. Readiness began to leak, not outward, inward. I felt it first as a mismatch between intention and outcome. Small, almost polite. I adjusted for one result and received another. The field noticed with me. The room asserted itself again, not visually, functionally. I sensed where a table would support weight, where a chair would resist movement. Physical rules applied without form. This was escalation without drama, the most dangerous kind. Reduce influence. I narrowed coherence, drawing boundaries closer. The field complied, but the overlap did not retreat. It adapted. Something had learned how to stay, not by force, by fitting. I tested absence, withdrew attention completely for a fraction of a moment. The room remained. That confirmed it. The overlap no longer required observation. It had crossed into persistence.
The system recalculated again, slower this time, cautious. I sensed the ordinary world reasserting nearby. Not the hallway. Later. Morning pressure. Distant traffic. The idea of routine. They brushed against the overlap and bent around it without noticing. Inconspicuous. The condition locked. The room aligned itself with neglect, with the spaces people pass without seeing.
Corners. Unused rooms. Pauses in thought. I felt unease sharpen. Nothing was happening, and that was the problem. The update had completed its final stage, not arrival. Integration into the unnoticed. I understood the cost now. This would not end loudly. No alarms, no disappearance, just gradual accommodation. My role shifted again. No longer balancing pressure, anchoring anomaly. The field accepted this without resistance. It preferred stability to purity. Final state. The words did not conclude anything. They described permanence. The room stayed ready to be ignored. The system moved on. And somewhere not far away, a door that had never existed before stood present in the dark. Anchoring felt heavier than balance, not pressure, responsibility without intent. I sensed the anomaly settle into its place, like sediment sinking after disturbed water. It no longer resisted. It no longer tested. It occupied. The room adjusted its proportions, not changing shape, agreeing with absence. It aligned with forgotten hours, with moments people lose between actions, with the pause before remembering why they entered a room. The ordinary world flowed around it smoothly, too smoothly. I felt morning arrive somewhere distant, not light, routine, the expectation of sequence, coffee, shoes, keys. None of it touched me. Remain unnoticed. The condition sealed. I reduced my coherence further, compressing presence until it matched background noise. The field helped. It wanted this quiet. Something passed through the room, not a person, an intention. A future decision rerouted slightly, a choice delayed by a second too long, a door not opened. The effect was small, permanent. I felt a quiet settle, the absence of escalation, the certainty that nothing would be resolved. Time stabilized fully, linear again, unconcerned. The update dissolved into infrastructure. No longer an event, a condition. I understood then why the hallway had listened. Not for fear, for compatibility. My awareness thinned until it barely distinguished itself from the field. I could withdraw further or remain as reference. I chose reference. Hold. The word did not echo. It did not need to. The room persisted. The anomaly anchored. The world continued. And somewhere, in a place no one would think to question, space made room for something it would never name. That was enough. Nothing else followed. After that, nothing demanded attention, which meant attention had changed. I sensed continuity settle into habit. The anomaly no longer registered as deviation. It blended with expectation, with the idea that some spaces simply feel wrong for no reason. The room no longer needed structure. It thinned, not disappearing, distributing itself across overlooked intervals, between steps, between thoughts, between words left unsaid. I felt my role loosen, not end, diffuse. Anchoring became passive, a bias in probability, a slight preference in how space chose to behave. Sustained. The condition answered without feedback. Somewhere distant, a person paused in a doorway and forgot why they stopped. Somewhere else, a light flickered once and stabilized. Small accommodations,
invisible corrections. I did not observe them directly. I felt their aggregate, like weight added to a scale too large to tip. Identity faded further, not erased, unnecessary. What mattered remained functional without reference to self. Time no longer passed through me. It passed near me, close enough to feel warmth, never close enough to disturb. The quiet held, the absence of escalation, the certainty that nothing would be resolved. I sensed the system finalize its adjustment. No alert, no marker.
Just a smooth return to indifference.
Normalized.
The word carried no relief, only accuracy. I did not withdraw. I did not advance. I remained as alignment. As the reason a room could exist without being entered, as the pause that never quite ends. And far away, when no one would ever think to look twice, reality learned how to keep going with something missing. It did not mind. Neither did I.